Visit the graves, for they remind you of the hereafter. Chapter 6. Visiting the Masters. Introduction. At the beginning of time, God created the blessed bodily form of our prophet. Now when a pottery maker is using ceramics to make pottery, he has leftover clay, which he usually throws away. However, God did not discard the excess clay left over after creating the blessed bodily form of the prophet. This blessed clay was used to make the forms of select saints from the prophet's nation. These select saints are high in rank and have a close connection with the prophet, due to them sharing some of his form and DNA. It is, for this reason, their temperament and thought process is identical to the prophet. The prophet said, "Indeed, God will send in this nation at the beginning or the end of the century, every 100 years, someone who will renew and resurrect the din." That is the religion of Islam. Amongst this elite group of saints is a person who resurrected Islam after its first millennium, that is, after 1,000 years of Islam had passed by. This person was given the title Mujaddid al-Thani, meaning the reviver of the second millennium. His full name is Sheikh Ahmad Faruqi Sindhi. He lived from 1564 to 1624, and he was from Sirhind Sharif in India, who became known to the masses as Imam-e-Rabbani. Hadrat Sahib inherited the love for Imam-e-Rabbani from his noble father, who dedicated his whole life to the teachings of the great master. On one occasion in his youth, a scholar encouraged Hadrat Sahib to visit the shrine of Imam-e-Rabbani in India. He proposed that Hadrat Sahib should learn to ride a bicycle for the journey, and further added that his village had wide open spaces and was the best place to practice. Out of a desire to visit Imam-e-Rabbani, Hadrat Sahib agreed to the proposal. The scholar and his son brought the bicycle in an open field and taught Hadrat Sahib how to ride. One day the scholar informed Hadrat Sahib that the shrine of Imam-e-Rabbani was far, and it was not possible to reach it on a bicycle. The training to ride a bicycle was merely an excuse. The real purpose was for the scholar to serve Hadrat Sahib. The scholar said, "It was on this pretense that we brought you here, and if we had told you this from the beginning, then you would not have agreed to our proposal." Muslims believe that the purpose of their existence revolves around serving and pleasing God. One of the best ways to serve God is to serve His creation. Of His creation, Muslims believe there is a great benefit in serving the pious and holy people. Hence the scholar devised a plan to serve Hadrat Sahib without him rejecting his proposal. Journey to Sirhind Sharif. Hadrat Sahib and 4 Sanghis set off on a train journey to Sirhind Sharif in India from the Punjab in Pakistan. Upon arrival at the railway station, a Sanghi scholar saw a signboard which read Sirhind Sharif and went over to kiss it out of respect. Everyone took off their shoes out of reverence for Imam-e-Rabbani, and the scholar bundled the shoes and carried them atop his head. Everyone tried to stop him, but he was determined to carry the load all the way to the shrine, which was a few miles away. Naturally, the first shrine Hadrat Sahib and the Sanghis visited was of Imam-e-Rabbani and his descendants. Hadrat Sahib kept a low profile and instructed the Sanghis not to surround him in public. It was the practice of the custodian of the shrine to serve 1 meal to the guests every day. However, he sent 2 meals to Hadrat Sahib's group and stated that this was based on a spiritual command of Imam-e-Rabbani. After a few days' stay at the shrine, it was time for Hadrat Sahib and his Sanghis to bid farewell to Imam-e-Rabbani. The scholar stood near the grave of Imam-e-Rabbani and recited the Islamic creed and exclaimed, "O Imam-e-Rabbani, be my witness to my declarations of faith." The purpose of this declaration was to make Imam Irabani a witness to his testimony. The belief behind this act is that the scholar believed that such a declaration would safeguard his faith and he would meet Imam Irabani on the Day of Judgment as a true believer. This may seem strange to some readers, but these are mystical matters which can only be understood by those who travel on the spiritual path. Revisiting Imam Irabani. Hadrat Sahib made another journey to Sirhind Sharif before the partition. Two Sanghis in Kotli received a message from Hadrat Sahib to meet him immediately. They set off early in the morning and arrived at Chechayan Sharif by 10 a.m. The two Sanghis had food before meeting Hadrat Sahib, who informed them he was going to visit Imam Irabani. In total, 10 people began the first part of the journey to Jhelum, where Hadrat Sahib was left with the Sanghis. A group of 10 then boarded a train towards Sirhind Sharif. Upon arrival, they paid their respects to both Imam Irabani and his descendants. The next day, they all walked to the graves of the prophets who are buried in the same region. The weather was hot, with no shade near the graves, and so Hadrat Sahib instructed the Sanghis to sit in the shade outside the cemetery, but he himself spent several hours meditating at the grave in the scorching sun. When Hadrat Sahib came out of the cemetery, a local resident invited them to his house for a meal. However, Hadrat Sahib politely declined his offer. Hadrat Sahib always focused on the purpose of the visit and did not get distracted by other people or other events. After the cemetery visit, the group returned to Imam Irabani's shrine. Hadrat Sahib instructed the Sanghis to return home, except for Qasim. Delhi. After instructing the rest of the Sanghis to return home, Hadrat Sahib and Qasim went to Delhi, where Qasim knew some policemen who had offered them some accommodation for their stay. When they arrived in Delhi, they were greeted by the police officers, who had prepared a beautiful and clean room for them to stay before offering them food. Hadrat Sahib said, "We prefer to stay in a mosque." Honouring Hadrat Sahib's wish, the policeman took the pair to a nearby mosque. An old Afghan stayed at this mosque, whom, after being introduced to Hadrat Sahib and Qasim, welcomed them to stay in the mosque. The old Afghan was very hospitable and gave them a clean room in the mosque. In the morning, he took them into his chamber and offered them some tea. Qasim wore a cap, and the old Afghan said, "If you see a fault in a Muslim, you should tell him. You are wearing a cap, but you should have a turban on top of it." Then he mentioned the blessings of wearing a turban. Thus far, the situation between the Afghan and Qasim was amicable. Then the old Afghan started talking about Deobandi Barelwi polemics, and a debate ensued between him and Qasim. Hadrat Sahib disliked arguments and said to Qasim, "Let us visit the shrine of Shah Abul Khair, who died in 1923. So they left the mosque and went to pay their respects to Shah Abul Khair, along with several other masters who are buried in the mosque courtyard. Qasim mentioned to Hadrat Sahib that he had promised the policeman that he would meet them later. He requested Hadrat Sahib to stay in the mosque until his return. Hadrat Sahib was quietly sat reading his litanies when a person came up to him and told him to leave because he was going to close the gates. Hadrat Sahib informed him that he did not need anything and only wanted to spend the night in the mosque, but the man refused. Left with no choice, Hadrat Sahib decided to leave to avoid any confrontation. Hadrat Sahib did not know the whereabouts of Qasim and knew no one else in the busy city. He walked around and found a small shrine. The custodian of the shrine asked Hadrat Sahib where he was from. "Jammu and Kashmir," he replied. He inquired further, "Why have you come here?" Hadrat Sahib informed him that he had come to visit the shrine of Shah Abul Khair, but was told to leave. Hadrat Sahib also mentioned that he had a friend with him who went out, and they had had no contact since departing. The custodian told Hadrat Sahib to relax and stay at the shrine. He then went to do some errands and promised to be back soon. Meanwhile, Hadrat Sahib stayed at the small shrine and did the job of the custodian. Occasionally, Hadrat Sahib went out to look for Qasim. After sunset, however, Hadrat Sahib noticed Qasim walking around aimlessly, so he called for him, but Qasim could not hear. Hadrat Sahib then ran across and met him. Qasim inquired what Hadrat Sahib was doing there. Hadrat Sahib explained what had taken place, and this infuriated Qasim. Hadrat Sahib said, "Leave it, let us have something to eat." Later, Qasim was still upset and went to the mosque to confront the person who had told Hadrat Sahib to leave, but the gates were closed. The custodian of the small shrine informed them that they were welcome to spend the night at the shrine. Hadrat Sahib said he wanted to stay at a mosque, and so the custodian took them to a nearby mosque. The next day they went back to the shrine of Shah Abul Khair. Qasim asked Hadrat Sahib to point out the person who asked him to leave. Hadrat Sahib replied, "No, leave him. This is not good manners." Shortly after, they both went to the central mosque for the Friday prayer, where they met the policeman. Qasim told them that the old Afghan was a Wahhabi, and they should not pray behind him. The policeman was shocked and said, "He is a very pious person, and he blows on water, and people come from as far as Bengal for this." Qasim retorted, "What is special about that? Even Hindu yogis can do that." Buffa Sharif. During the occupation of Delhi, many descendants of Imam-e Rabbani who lived in the city had to migrate due to British oppression. Some of these descendants settled in various parts of the Indian subcontinent. One family settled in a remote area named Buffa in the northwest frontier. The head of the family, Haji Muhammad, who died in 1898, was a direct descendant of Imam-e Rabbani and had migrated to this region during the colonial period in India. Amongst his famous deputies was Sayyid Kalam Shah, who died in 1899, from Mirpur. Haji Muhammad was one of the Grand Masters of Hadrat Sahib. Therefore, Hadrat Sahib decided to pay homage to him. In 1947, at the age of 26, Hadrat Sahib made a long journey with two Sanghis to Buffa Sharif. When they finally arrived in Buffa Sharif, no one knew of Haji Muhammad. During their quest, they noticed an old, ill person who was resting on a bed under a cypress tree. They asked him if he knew the family who were descendants of Imam-e Rabbani. He informed them that the present head of the family was known as Sahibzada Sahib, Bashir Ahmad. The old man then instructed them to wait and rest in the mosque while a local young man went to bring him. Out of respect for Sahibzada Sahib, Hadrat Sahib did not remain in the mosque and decided to accompany the messenger. He knocked at the door, and a tall, young, freckle-faced man appeared. Hadrat Sahib greeted him and asked about the location of Haji Muhammad's grave. He responded, "I shall take you there later, but first you must have some tea." He brought tea and food for them before taking them to the graveyard. Due to the influence of the anti-Sufi movements in the area, the graveyard of Haji Muhammad was severely neglected. Even though the path to the cemetery was covered with rocks and thorns, Hadrat Sahib took off his shoes out of respect for the saint. The Sanghis cleared the area near the grave to sit down and recited excerpts from the Holy Quran. A local school teacher went past the graveyard and spoke to Sahibzada Sahib in Pashto. Known in Urdu and Hindi literature as Patani, Pashto is the second largest regional language of Pakistan. mainly spoken in the west and northwest of the country. It seemed the school teacher was asking, "Where are these ignorant people from?" Then he inquired directly from the Sangis, and they replied that they had travelled from Kashmir to pay respects to their Grand Master, Haji Muhammad. He said, "I do not know of the person inside the grave, as he lived before my time, but the present descendants do not possess anything special. However, they are hospitable." Hadrat Sahib responded, "In a period where everyone is chasing material things, is this quality of hospitality not worthy of merit?" The purpose of the visit to Bafa Sharif was multifactorial. Hadrat Sahib wanted to pay his respects to the Grand Master and also wanted to meet the descendants to assess how they upheld their pious ancestors' legacy. Hadrat Sahib observed that the family had been influenced by the anti-Sufi groups, thus failed to maintain the traditions of their forefathers. As a result of this observation, Hadrat Sahib set about to reconnect the family with their past Sufi traditions. Bawali Sharif. One of the leading places that Qibla Alam had spiritual connections with was Bawali Sharif, located near Jhelum. It was here that he served his first master, Khwaja Muhammad Bakhsh, who died in 1995. Hadrat Sahib visited the noble widow of Khwaja Muhammad Bakhsh. She called Hadrat Sahib near and gently stroked his back. When she saw Hadrat Sahib's face, she remembered Qibla Alam and tears began to flow from her eyes. She pointed towards a clay oven in the house and stated, "Your father heated this oven and we baked chapatis. When it was hot weather, your father used to stand near his master and move the hand fan for his comfort. Sometimes this would last all night." She expressed her impression of Qibla Alam in these words: "Outwardly he seemed very simple, but inwardly he was a knowledgeable and thoughtful person. He served his master's residence with utmost devotion." She continued, "Although there were many devout followers of the master, I had not seen anyone like him. It seemed he was not a human but an angel." Afterwards she summoned her relative and ordered him to place a cap and turban on Hadrat Sahib's head on behalf of the masters. The above account suggests that Qibla Alam was very steadfast, and this was a quality that Hadrat Sahib sought to attain. Self-discipline. Hadrat Sahib's life revolves around the concept of steadfastness. A person must be steadfast for him or her to develop and progress on the spiritual path. Since childhood, Hadrat Sahib showed signs of possessing this exceptional quality. For example, he began to perform daily prayers from an early age and continued this practice throughout his life. This characteristic was evident in everything that Hadrat Sahib did, and it was possibly one of the main reasons for his success in later life. Chura Sharif. The above accounts suggest that Hadrat Sahib loved to maintain links with the holy people and places that played an essential role in his spiritual progress. Apart from Bafa and Bawali Sharif, Hadrat Sahib also had links with Chura Sharif in Attock. Situated at 213 kilometers to the west of Kotli, Attock is a city located in the northern part of the Punjab province in Pakistan, near the country's capital, Islamabad. Hadrat Sahib wanted to pay his respects to the saints buried there and to observe the descendants of the masters. He chose a trusted Sangi, Muhammad Zaman, to travel with him. They both boarded a train for Chura Sharif. In Chura Sharif they met many descendants of the masters and observed the annual commemoration ceremony that took place. They caught the night train back and alighted at Golra Sharif station. It was extremely cold and they needed to offer their prayers, so for ablution they pulled icy water from the well. Shortly after, they went to pay their respects at the shrine of Pir Mir Ali Shah, who died in 1938. A descendant of our Prophet,
Pir Mir Ali Shah was a Sufi saint, scholar and author from Gulra Sharif, a town in Pakistan's capital, Islamabad. Hadrat Sahib or Muhammad Zaman walked to the city and prayed at a mosque. After this, they were invited to the home of a stranger they just met to take part in a gathering he was holding for a deceased relative. The students from the local mosque were already present, and after the meeting, the host gave an abundance of food as well as some money to Hadrat Sahib and Muhammad Zaman. A person stepped forward and took the money from both of them and told them to wait a while and he would arrange transport for them. They waited a short while, but soon realized they had been tricked. Due to this, they did not have enough money for the return train journey. At the station, a policeman offered to get them tickets if they paid him a bribe, but they refused his offer. They spent the cold night in the mosque with only one shawl and palm fibre as a mattress between them. In the morning they set off on foot to a train station outside of the city. They had hoped that they could buy tickets for their journey with the little money they had. However, the station master informed them that they could only get tickets to a local station, and from there they would need to acquire further tickets for the rest of the journey. Unfortunately, they did not have enough money to pay for 2 separate journeys, and so they asked the station master, "We are simple-minded people. Could you give us a complete ticket to our destination?" The station master reluctantly gave them the tickets. When they arrived at the hometown of Muhammad Zaman, they were met by Qasim. Qasim could tell that Hadrat Sahib and Muhammad Zaman had had an arduous journey, so he quickly prepared food and warm clothing for them. The above account exemplifies some of Hadrat Sahib's qualities: trust, focus, simplicity, honesty, and humility. In his travelling and encounters with challenges, Hadrat Sahib upheld the qualities he inherited from Qibla Alam. By doing so, the Sanghis who spent their time with him attained some of these qualities by observing him and nurturing their daily practices.